Welcome, welcome. Today I saw a fascinating pocket I really want to share with you. This is by the designer Akris Punto. Saks, Neiman's, Bloomingdale's, $1,250 for this little jacket. Love the pocket. It's a little more vertical than horizontal. Just a few things to note. It's actually not a pocket. I think that's why I love it, because y'all know, if you know me, you know I don't really like pockets, but I love the effect of pockets. So it's a pocket if you put stuff up this way, but not really a pocket you'd want to use. So let's go learn how to do it and all the details. So I'm really excited to bring you this pocket today. It's just really a beautiful pocket. Very easily done. The first thing we really want to do is understand the parts. And this is just like the Welt pocket. You really want to familiarize yourself with the Welt pocket. We've done that a little while ago. We put that online because it's not any harder than the Welt. It is a Welt, obviously, but it's not any harder. But you've really got to understand that and get that before I think you move on to this. Now, a couple things I've done is there's 3 parts. There's 4 parts. There's the garment itself, and this is the fashion fabric. And then there's the welts. Then there's, I'm going to just call it the lower pocket, and then the upper pocket. And I've done them all in different colors. Normally you would not do that. The jacket that I want you to look at is Akris, A-K-R-I-S, Punto, P-U-N-T-O. And the reason you should look at that is it will give you some ideas. I would normally say, like in a Welt, all of this would be the same color, but that's not necessarily true. The way they did it is they did this part and this part matched, even though this is a different I mean, it has to be cut differently. But they did it on a stripe, and they did it so it went all the way across, and then they used this welt as a contrast. So many different ways it can be done. I'm only doing it with the different colors and with the red thread, so that you can more easily see the parts. And then, of course, the snap is just added later. That's just the detail, but I just love it. I mean, I just really like it. Okay, so let's take this away, and we'll come back to it if we need to. But here we go. Here's my fashion fabric. This is going to be, like I said, that top portion of the pocket, and this one's going to be the lower portion. And I'm going to use the wrong side just because it's a little bit lighter and a little easier to see. And then, of course, I've got my 2 welts. So the welts are normally, they're 8 inches long. These are 11 inches long. So it's 9 inches from mark to mark. I'm going to show you how to get this. 9 inches. And so I want to cut my welts 1 inch longer on each end. So they're 11 inches long, still 1 inch wide, and they are cut on the bias. And of course, obviously, in this case, they've got to be cut on the bias so they can do that curve like that. But like I said, we'll show that in just a minute. The first thing I really have to do is I've got to draw myself a pattern. And the reason I have to do that is because I've got to have first off something to follow. And then also, these 2 pocket pieces are not the same. I'm going to put that one on the bottom because that's the lower, and this one's the upper. And the only difference between them is that the lower one has an added 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when I make my pattern, and again, I'm going to show you how to do that, then I'm going to cut the 2 pockets, and I cut it a little bit higher than what I need to, but you'll want to take it into the side seam. The side seam is where they'll anchor in. The side seam will hold and give it some support, but you're going to sew all this together here in a minute. All right, so you're going to decide the curve of your pocket, and obviously that's anything you want it to be. You know, but I'm going to tell you what I did is I just took my French curve to Neiman Marcus and I laid it down. So what I came up with is you're going to go 16 to 21 on the curve, and then you're going to flip this and leave 21 here and go 21 to 17. So this is 5, and this is 4, and there's your 9. Now, once you've drawn that, when you do this, you want to make sure that it's roughly 6 inches from point A to point B. So again, let me go back to this pocket. If you want to more look at this shape, and from the corner here to the corner here, I'm right about 6 inches. So this curve, you can kind of tell where to get the points. Initially when I went to do it, and I laid this down, and then I flipped it and laid it down like this. 17 to 21, flip it, leave 21 there, and come 16 up to here. 16 to 21, flip it. All right, so when I did that, I was too far this way. And so it left too wide of a pocket there. You want to make sure that it's not too wide. So that's going to be from point to point before you start to do the pocket. You want that to be, it'll be about 6.5. By the time you do the welts, it'll come down to 6. All right, so what I did is I made a pattern of what the shape was going to be. And you're going to need that because now I'm going to, and you know, normally on the welts, you just have 2 rectangular or 1 big rectangle, but that's not going to work on this type of pocket because of the curve. So I'm going to have the pattern. The upper pocket, I'm going to cut exactly like the pattern and then cut extra up here. And then the bottom pocket, I drew it on so you could see. And then I added a 1/2 inch. And you'll see why, but those are just the pattern pieces. And so that's my pocket. I'm going to kind of move that away for a minute. And then I went ahead and just drew this onto my fashion fabric. It won't show. I'm on the right side of my fashion fabric, and it's just a little easier to place the welts there. So I just put the notch there and the notch there. You want to go in when you place your pocket. It's about 3 inches from center front. That's all your call. It's all design, but you want to make sure that you're where you want to be. Okay, and that's all I need the pattern for. I don't need that anymore. So again, I did this in red thread. So there's still 3 steps, just like with the welt. I'm going to start, and remember that my welts are 1 inch longer because this is 9 inches. I cut my welts 11 inches. So I'm going to do the same thing I've always done with the welt pocket. I'm going to secure it. I'm going to back stitch. And I'm going to sew right down the middle of that strip. And I'm keeping this strip along the curve. You know, I drew that line on there. So it's not hard to do, very easy to do. But you want to make sure you're sewing right down the center. My stitch length is, I do 3.5. And every once in a while, because you're going to curve, you can let your foot up and let it release for a little bit. So this is just not hard at all to do. I take the strip and go right down the middle of my foot, so you can see that it's pretty easy to stay down the center. And then when you get to the end, backstitch. So I don't think there's anything hard about this. I think it's just where technically you want to be accurate. And so I clip all my threads. And so you can see step 1 is a line. All right, and then step 2, you're going to do the same thing. There's 3 steps. Each step is done twice, just like with the welt. I'm going to butt the raw edges up together. The folds are to the outside. Right across the same spot, to make sure that end of that pocket is going to be straight, I'm going to start and stop in the same place. And then just lay this in here. The bias is what will really, you know, be important. Just lay it right in there. Kind of just push those raw edges in together. And the bias will nicely go in there. And stay down the center of the strip. These are 1/2 inch wide. They're folded in half. And I'm stitching down the center of them. So my the lips of my welt are going to end up being 1/4 of an inch wide. Make sure again when you stop and start that you're right even at the end. So what I've always liked about this method, and I've said it many, many times, is that I'm on the right side of my fashion fabric and I've stitched my 2 lines. You can see I'm straight across there and I'm straight across there. If I haven't done this right, if it's not exactly like I want it to be, I can take it out and do it again. So it's not like it's critical that it be exactly right because, you know, I can always mess with it. And you may not be able to see, but down here, I'm really closer to this side than I am this side. So these welts are going to overlap each other. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to leave it. I just really want to show you the method as opposed to having just an absolute perfect pocket. So I'm going to come in between the two, right in the middle of the lines, and I'm going to cut about 1 inch from the end, again, just like the welt pocket that we've done before. I'm going to cut right to the corners and leave that triangle nice and long. It's much easier to leave it longer than to, I think in the old days, it was only like a little tiny triangle and really hard to do. I'm not really cutting the welts because they're really just butted up against each other. All I'm doing is cutting the fashion fabric. And then about 1 inch before the end, stop, and then just cut right to the point. Don't cut through. These are where your scissors and your nice sharp scissors are going to be your best friend. Okay, and again, just like the welt. I keep going back to the welt because I don't want you to feel like it's any harder than. This is my bottom piece. You can see my line. I drew my line on there simply so you're going to see that it's a little easier to follow if I have a line. I'm going to take one welt, and this is the outside welt first, and I'm going to tuck it to the inside. And when I do that, you'll see that that welt will come right around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it, the raw edge, on the raw edge of my pocket, so that I'll have a little bit of a line to follow. I haven't turned the whole thing inside. You don't need to, but I want to line it up to there. And remember, in the beginning, I'm going to sew the pocket and just the pocket and the welt, nothing else. So what I'm doing here is I'm placing the welt on the line. I drew this mark. This was the top of the welt, so that's where my backstitch line goes. And you can see that my actual fold of the welt goes right on that drawn portion. So I'm going to sew this, and then I'll show you where I'm sewing it. This is just different. It's not hard. It's just different than the other method that we did the welt pocket. Move that triangle out of the way. You don't want to get that. I'll sew this, and then I'll show it to you. And right now I'm just the fashion fabric. I'm just the pocket and the welt. And then I'm going to come right onto the fashion fabric. And I'm stitching, you'll be stitching right on the fashion fabric, right where you already have. And because I can see the line underneath, I'm putting my stitch line, the original stitch line that was the welt, and I'm putting it right on the line that I drew on this pocket piece, just so that it's easier to follow. It does not have to be exact. I'll show you this in just a second. Because this is the bottom portion, and you're going to see it doesn't have to be that exact. And then remember, I'm toward the end, so I'm going to poke that end in. I'm on the outside welt. It'll turn around. It'll kind of pivot itself and turn around. And I'm going to lay that down and stitch. And when I finish, I'm going to get off the fashion fabric right where the back stitching was and just continue stitching just the welt to the pocket. So you can see that's where I've stitched all along there. And when I bring this down, you can see there's my welt. Okay, it's very pretty, very easy to do. And so you can see that as it lays flat, and when I go to press it, I'm not going to press it. I'll just want to pull my welt out to make sure it's nice and pretty. Okay, very simple. That's the first one. All right, so again with the welt pocket method, we do the same thing and we do it twice. So now we're going to turn this one to the inside. I'm going to turn that one to the inside. We're going to do it, it's going to be done a little differently because when we do this one, this is actually going to, sorry, let me tuck this into the top side here. I'll pull that to the top side. And I'm going to just kind of finger press it a little bit. So when you look inside, what you can see is there's the raw edge. So where the pocket's going to come is right in that area to face that raw edge. This pocket's just so pretty. I just really, really like it. It's so different and so unique, and yet it's really flattering. A lot of times these curved pockets, they just don't really, I don't know, I don't think they're really that flattering, but I think this one's really nice. Okay, so I poke that up. So you can see that's what it's going to lay now. And then this is my pocket piece. Remember, this was cut just like the line, but because this has been taken back, this ends up having a seam allowance on it already. So that's why I cut that just like the line. I had to add a seam allowance to the bottom because the bottom one was flipping away, but because this welt is flipping in, I didn't need a seam allowance on that. So I'm going to turn it to the inside so that I can kind of see that where I'm wanting to finish is, and kind of lay it like that to get the orientation. That's how it's going to go. You can see that that's the one that's wider. The other ends are the same. And just go in there and get it to finish up this edge. So if that's the edge I need it to be finished, then I'm going to actually take the pocket and put it, stitch it this way. So just kind of go in and lay it down and then flip it the opposite way so that you can, it'll cover all the parts that you need it to cover. And remember that whatever side of this pocket that I'm doing, it is not going to show. And so this is the portion that's kind of, let me go back to my sample here, just so you can see for a minute. This is the portion that's up here. So it's not going to show. It doesn't even matter if you use the right side or wrong side, but just so that you know that's the part we're on right now. Okay, so I'm going to pull that down just to get my alignment, and I'm going to sew it there. So I'm going to sew that right where I've stitched before. When you lay it on top like this, it's easiest to do it, work from the right side. Lay it right on top, and I'm going to stitch from the side, cover the raw edge where I want to cover. And because you know that you're not going to stitch from this side because you can't see the stitching. So that's going to be your clue that you're going to have to flip it and come to the inside. And once you flip it, you'll get the orientation, you'll get the layout, you'll take this welt, you'll bring it here, and that's where you'll start stitching. I'll start with just the welt in the pocket. I'll sew along, I'll pick up the fashion fabric right there, and then stitch all along that way. All right, so we'll do that, and then I'll show you that stitching. Now this I don't have to back stitch because I overstitch. Once I get to that where I've already stitched the welt, and I'm stitching this all the way around, and just follow that exact same line that I stitched on the welt, and then overstitch in the beginning and overstitch at the end. The pocket does have to be shaped. Without it being shaped, it really won't lay down correctly. Okay, so you can see I overstitched there and I overstitched there. So now what I'm going to do is, remember, this has to kind of go up inside because the welt is stitched in between. So now I'm going to push this up, and I'm going to do the third step, and the third step is just simply the ends. But you'll have to just get this all straightened up and get it laying nicely. And once you do that, I'm going to pull all this down in place. You can see this will all pull together. This is where I always want to make sure that I fold this down, get my welts laying nice and straight together, put them next to one another. And then what I'm going to do is stitch straight across the end of my triangle. Again, just like I would in the welts. So I'm going to make sure that's straight. Kind of look on both sides and make sure you've really got those welts laying together. The end will give this pocket a lot of stability. So I really want to make sure it's straight. And obviously you could press it at this point if you wanted to, but all of these will cross exactly how you want them to. So nothing has to be pressed unless you just want to. The only thing I would caution you in pressing it is just not to agitate the corners. So I'm going to leave it under there, right over the biggest part of that triangle. And I'll show you where I stitched here because it's in red. You can see there's the big part of the triangle. I went right over the big part of the triangle. And so when I pull it up there, you can see it's just completely flat. All right, and then I'm going to do that the same way. So you can see when I look it up, here's this beautiful inside portion. Now I noticed as you press it, this will come in easier. You just pull these welts out of both sides and give it a nice press. Just take a little bit of patience and do the same thing here. I'm going to pull this up. Here's my big triangle. Peek under the triangle, make sure those welts are together, which they are. Okay, and then sew across the end of the triangle. Typically, if you're sewing across the end of the triangle, you're closing the pocket. And you could do this too. You could sew this one this way and this one this way. But you'll want to leave on the extra so that it had the pocket itself. You want to, I could go all that way, I'm not going to. But notice I cut the pocket wider, and the reason I did that is because this is going to actually sew into the side seam. So don't cut that off. Go ahead and sew the pocket into the side seam of the jacket, and it will give it a little more stability. All right, so there's my pocket. I should press it. I could press it. I'm not going to worry about it. You'll totally get it. Here's my actual finish. I absolutely love it. It's adorable. You can see that when it's pressed, those welts come out just a little bit better. And then I just put the snap there. It goes through 2 layers. The snap on the bottom, there's only 1 layer there, so be sure that whatever layer this is, it's nice and stable. And that is called the Akris Punto curved pocket. I love it. We'll call it the curved snap pocket. But the name of the jacket is called the Faded Denim Striped. And you can see it all over. It's $1,250. It's at Saks, it's at Neiman's, it's at Bergdorf Goodman. Anyway, I love the pocket, and you will see it on some of my jackets. So happy sewing from Silhouette Patterns.